I call to order this regular meeting of the City Commission this Monday, September 23rd, 2019. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk, has the roll been taken?
It has. All are present tonight.
Tonight we have several proclamations and presentations. Our first is to introduce our new fire equipment operator, Brad Dopiker. I'm saying that right? Close, yeah. And our paid-on-call firefighter, Brock Crystal.
And if you'll come forward, Assistant Fire Chief Doug Labsinger is going to do the introductions this evening.
Good evening, everyone. It's really great to be here. It's an honor to introduce to you two outstanding individuals that are joining our department. I'd like to introduce to you Brad Depker. He's our new fire equipment operator. He has lived in Shepherd most of his life. He's here tonight with his wife and his daughter for moral support. He comes from us from Mobile Medical Response, where he worked for 18 years and was a medical supervisor, paramedic supervisor. And he has also served his community for over 20 years as a firefighter for Shepherd Fire Department. And we are really excited to have him join our team. I'd also like you to meet Brock Crystal. Brock is a single man, lives in Mount Pleasant with his dog Duke. And he has, he works as a small engines mechanic and also as a fitness trainer, so he's kind of our young stud. And he also serves our country with the Michigan National Guard, and we're pretty proud of that. They're both very excited about their new opportunities and look forward to serving our community.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service, Brock.
Next, we have a proclamation recognizing the Bowlers Hall of Fame, and I'll come down to the podium and read the proclamation. And Jerry?
Yep.
Whereas the Mount Pleasant Bowlers Hall of Fame was created in 1984 to create those persons, bowlers, proprietors, and sponsors who have contributed to the game of bowling. And whereas candidates for this honor may be bowlers, proprietors, or sponsors and have been a member of either the Mount Pleasant Women's Bowling Association or the Mount Pleasant Men's Bowling Association or the Mount Pleasant USBC and have individually performed through bowling ability, promotion, or other outstanding acts for 15 years or more. And whereas selections for the induction into the Hall of Fame are made on the basis of character, sportsmanship, personality, leadership, dedication, and achievement. Now, therefore, I, William L. Joseph, Mayor of the City of Mount Pleasant, do hereby proclaim October 13th, 2019 as Bowlers Hall of Fame Day. In Mount Pleasant, and the extended congratulations to the newest member of the Mount Pleasant Bowlers Hall of Fame, Chad Gutzman, Jeff Cross, Ray Klosiski, and Becky Pope.
Yes.
In witness whereof, I hereunto set my hand and the great seal of the City of Mount Pleasant, Michigan, this 23rd day of September 2019.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. It's a great honor to be on the Bowling Hall of Fame. We recognize up to 4 people a year that have bowled for 15 years or more and also done things with the youth in bowling or in the community. So it's a great honor to have the city do this for us again, and If anybody would want to come to the Bowling Hall of Fame, it's on October 13th. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have a presentation on the 2020 census by Chloe Updegraff, coordinator of the Great Lakes Bay Regional Hub. Come to the podium. I'm struggling with last names.
That was perfect. Nailed the last name. Thank you. So thank you all for having me here tonight. Just to quickly introduce myself, my name is Chloe Updegraff, and my background is in public health. I did my master's in public health at the University of Michigan, and I have worked with various populations, from the tribal population here in Mount Pleasant to rural populations in Haiti. I'm really trying to bring public health into this endeavor. What we're doing here is separate from the federal government's 10-year effort to count every resident of the United States. That effort always misses some folks. And so what we're trying to do with this Great Lakes Bay Regional Census Hub is make sure that we're reaching the hardest to count populations, the most vulnerable populations, the folks that have the most at stake in our community. So our ultimate goal is that we get a fair and accurate count and that we reach every single person in this region. But we especially want to make sure that we're approaching this from an equity lens, making sure that we're reaching, especially, like I said, our most vulnerable populations. So that's just a little bit of background. Do I just click? Sorry, I don't want to.
The arrow will work.
Okay. Sorry. Down arrow. There we go. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Sorry. So our upcoming census has some unique challenges and some unique barriers that we haven't really seen in previous census. First of all, the census is going to be largely online, so it's an online first model. And for a lot of us, that's great because we can take the census on our phone, on our tablet, on our computer, and that's awesome. But if we think about a lot of the populations within our region, a lot of folks with low access to internet, a lot of folks that are low income, and our region is becoming increasingly more low income and older. And so for those folks especially, this is going to be a big barrier. In addition, we've got some Census Bureau cutbacks. So their local offices are being cut back. Their regional door-to-door outreach is being cut back. They're still doing some of that stuff, but not nearly to the extent that they have in the past. And so that one-to-one outreach that we've seen before is not going to be happening nearly to the extent that it has in the past. In addition, we've got a greater discomfort of dealing, especially with the federal government, according to the Pew Research Center. And so we have an environment where the Census Bureau is cut back and constrained, not going to have that local presence like they have in the past. And then we're moving to this online first model for the census, like I said, which is great for a lot of us, but for especially our low income and our older adult population within this county and the region, that's especially going to leave a lot of folks out. If we're looking at our impacts financially that come in from the census, it's pretty big. For Isabella County, we have about $104 million of annual federal funding at stake. For the state of Michigan as a whole, just a 1% undercount will cost our state $1 billion in federal funding. And so we really need to make sure we're getting this right. We've got constraints, we've got barriers, and a lot is at stake. We need to make sure we're doing this correctly. So as far as programs that utilize census data for their funding, these programs are huge, they're widespread, and folks in our community are dependent on these programs. Things like Medicare, Medicaid, SNAP, food assistance, WIC, free and reduced school lunches for our kids, energy assistance, children's special health care, the list goes on. And it's not just these social safety net programs, it's everything. Funding for our roads, funding for our schools, funding for our communities comes from this data. And so we really do have a lot at stake, not just financially, but especially the folks that are dependent on some of these programs here. they're going to be the folks that lose out the most on the back end if we don't get this right. And that's why we're really trying to make this an on-the-ground, community-driven effort to make sure that we're reaching our most vulnerable populations. So I probably don't need to talk to you guys about this. You're working in local government. You know how this can impact our community. $800 billion comes in from the federal government to states, local communities. This is built structures, this is hospitals, this is our schools, our universities, funding for so many important programs. And specifically for Mount Pleasant, we're right on the cusp of that 25,000 population measure, which is huge. If we drop below that, we lose a lot. And I'm sure you can tell me more than what I can tell you about how much we're going to lose if we don't reach that 25,000 measure. It's super important. And again, that important federal funding coming into our communities, we need to make sure we're holding on to that. I haven't mentioned yet, but our census is also responsible for our voice in Washington, D.C. So Michigan lost a seat in the House of Representatives in the last census. The prediction from George Washington University is that we could potentially lose 2 seats this time around. We know we've lost population. We know that we were hit hard with the Great Recession. And so we need to especially make sure that we're reaching the folks that were not reached the last time around. Our voice in DC, our voice in Lansing, and that important federal funding for our local communities is what we have at stake. So here's how we're doing this. Like I said, this is a federal government endeavor. This is not usually something that the philanthropic world takes on. But given the gaps that I talked about and the barriers and the knowledge that we have of folks that are hard to reach and hard to count, a variety of organizations within our region got involved in this effort. And actually the whole state of Michigan has some presence of a nonprofit complete count committee in their area. So we've got the Council of Michigan Foundations, the Michigan Nonprofit Association, our 4 community foundations, so Saginaw, Midland, Bay, and Isabella County are all supporting this. And the reason being, I talked about the big financial impact, but if we're looking at an individual level financial impact, we're gonna lose $1,800 for each person that's not counted. And that's over that 10-year period, so multiplied by the 10-year period of the census, multiplied by each person who doesn't take part. So we can quickly see how impactful this is gonna be for our community. And that's why the nonprofits in the area have really rallied around this to make sure that we're getting it right. This is how we're gonna do it, working with local nonprofits, forming an advisory committee to guide the work in each community, making sure that we're reaching the folks that are the most vulnerable, and that we're working with organizations that serve those folks to make sure that they're being educated, discussed, and they know the impact of their voice within this community. We've got grants available too. I won't go too much into that, but we wanna make sure that folks are being reached, especially the hardest to count populations. And this is what the county looks like. So I'm guessing that's a little bit hard to see from where you're sitting, but these are the low response scores for Isabella County. The areas in the dark red are the areas that had the highest low response scores, meaning that more folks in those areas didn't respond to the last census. And so therefore with this work, those are the areas that we're trying to target. You can see the whole county though. There were areas, even our best counts, we still undercounted about 15% of the folks. But then if we look, I mean, the city is right in there in that red area, a lot of folks that didn't respond. And so we want to make sure that we are reaching everybody this time around, students, homeless, every population that we can, to make sure that we get this right, that we're not losing that $1,800 per person, that we're not losing that voice in Washington, D.C., and that we're getting this right for Isabella County and for the Great Lakes Bay region. So here's how we can do it. I know I'm close on time here, but I really need your help making sure that we're reaching folks. And so anything on social media, newsletters, outreaching with constituents, outreaching with neighbors, helping identify some hard to count populations within our area, having some celebrations and some visibility around Census Day, which is April 1st, or anything within the time frame of the census, which is March to July of 2020. Making sure that we're outreaching, especially with the hardest to count individuals within this county. So that is the gist of what we're trying to do here. Again, I want to make sure that I'm delineating from the federal government effort. The goal is the same. We want a fair and accurate count. We want to make sure that we're not losing that precious federal funding, that important voice in Washington, D.C. and in Lansing. But we want to make sure that this time around we're reaching the populations that are going to be losing out the most on the back end if we don't get this right. So if there are questions, I can take a couple. Okay.
Thank you. It's huge, the numbers. If we drop below 25,000, the last time I checked on it, that affects our Act 51 money, which would amount to more than $10 million over 10 years lost for roads in this community. The biggest undercount that we got really severely undercounted in 1990. It was the first time since the 40s when we had lost population. The hardest group to reach are the off-campus students. This isn't home. Home is where mom lives. Home is what it says on my driver's license. What has Mount Pleasant ever done for me except break up good parties and give me MIPs? Home is where you live the majority of the year, and if you're a resident of Central Michigan University, if you're a student at Central Michigan University, you're a resident of either Mount Pleasant or
Yep.
Union Township.
That's exactly right. And part of our work with the advisory committee, we've got representation from CMU. We want to make sure that those students especially are reached.
The on-campus is not a problem.
Yeah, the census will handle that, but it is those
It's the
students that are
off-campus,
living.
yep.
Exactly. You know, I went to Michigan, and so if we've got students that are coming here, especially from Ohio, we want to make sure that they're counted here for Michigan. There's no question it's going to be a tough population to reach, but we're doing everything we can to work with the landlords, work with campus housing and outreach, whatever we have to do. But you're exactly right. It's going to be a tough population to
And
reach.
you don't have to be a U.S. citizen to be counted because it's a count of people. It's not a count of citizens. So all the
Yep.
foreign students get counted as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, they're spending 9 to 10 months out of the year here. We need to make sure that they're counted for Mount Pleasant, for sure.
Any more questions for Chloe? Vice Mayor Gillis?
Just to clarify, the map that has the dark red in our area is because we have the highest non-response?
Exactly. The low response score, the higher the number it is on that, the
Right.
lower the responses were. So those areas that are in darkest red are the areas that are going to get the most focus from this hub, our grant work, and our outreach. Because last time around, those were the areas that didn't respond as well as other areas. And there's a prediction, too, that it'll be lower this time around.
So this was from 10 years ago when the census, 2010.
Partially. So I was working with the county GIS. It's based on responses from last time, and then the Census Bureau has some predictive measures that they can do to predict what responses will look like this time around. So it's based on 10 years ago data with some,
Plus
I
the
don't know,
new
some
type
stuff.
of response, not
Yeah,
going door to door and
Yeah,
getting
because,
mailed in.
exactly, that door-to-door stuff is gonna be scaled back. You know, at least the city has good internet access, whereas the out-county areas don't, so those will need some focus still. But those areas in dark red are where we're really gonna try to focus our efforts because the responses were so low last time around, and it's predicted it would be worse this time.
Yeah, that really surprises me that our
Mm-hmm.
city has 35 to 39.9% of people that didn't respond to the census.
It's
But
pretty
that's
scary.
South of High Street.
It's pretty scary, you know, and if we're talking $1,800 for each individual that doesn't respond, I mean, it adds up. It adds up really quickly. Yeah,
One other thing, when we were undercounted in 1990, as the follow-up, and God knows what the Census Bureau is going to do this time, but their people for follow-up would go to the assessor's office and say, "Hi, we're from the census. We need to know who owns 409 Main Street." And they would give them that information. They'd say, "Bye, thank you." Well, when the owner of that is ABC Corporation, you're not going to find them. Make sure you tell them that in Mount Pleasant, all rental properties have a property manager, and that's the person they need to get a hold of. Who was in that apartment last year? Who was on that lease? As opposed to, well, we'll look them up in the phone book. Well, first of all, nobody's got phones anymore. Everybody has cell phones, so there are no phone books, so.
Yeah, it's new ground, new territory, and with their budgetary setbacks, they're not going to be able to do some of that canvassing on the ground stuff. They are doing some of it, but you're right, a lot of that stuff might be missed. So we're hoping that we can, in partnership with our local nonprofits, make sure that we have coverage of situations like that.
Jacob, have you guys been doing address verifications ahead of time?
The answer for the public at home was yes.
Any other questions? Well, Chloe, thanks a lot for your presentation, and good luck.
Thank you. Thanks for having me tonight. I greatly appreciate it.
Our next presentation is a departmental presentation by our own city clerk, Jeremy Howard.
All right, to make sure we get the right presentation up there with all the presentations we have tonight. So, happy to be here. Like the mayor said, my name is Jeremy Howard. I'm the city clerk. Most of you know me already because I'm sitting next to you most nights. So we'll go through some of the, I can make this one work too. There we go. All right, so start out with a few easy things. The clerk services that we offer. The clerk obviously is the clerk of the city commission and the parliamentarian for the city commission. And we do business license. In the office, you can actually come in and get all kinds of different business license, from peddler to transient merchant to material handling, all kinds of different different licenses that we offer. We actually had 27 of those licensed in 2018. You can pay your parking ticket in the clerk's office. We had 2,654 tickets that were actually written in 2018, so that's a lot of people coming in and doing appeals and paying parking tickets. Registering to vote in elections is a huge part of the clerk's office. We actually have 12,404 current. That was our number as of today. I tweaked that number a little bit. It kind of goes up and down on a daily basis. You can absentee vote, which just started today. We had several people coming in already, absentee voting and picking up ballots, and we're sending out ballots already. So that is happening in the office. We typically have about 20% in most elections that decide to absentee vote, and we have over 600 people on our permanent absentee list. Freedom of information requests are done through the clerk's office. We had 45 of those in 2018. There are many more. That does not include the number of FOIA requests that police and fire department get. They have a lot more when you're talking about accident reports and fire reports and things along those lines, so their numbers are much higher than that even. We do bids and RFPs. We had 45 of those in 2018. We process cemetery and burial information, whether that's walk-ins wanting to find out information about the cemetery, or actually purchasing lots or dealing with burials with funeral homes. We had 13 lots sold and 33 burials in 2018. And we have ordinance information available. All of the ordinances are officially kept as records in the clerk's office. We now have over 1,048 active ordinances, many more that were kind of repealed over the years before that even, but the active ones are at 1,048 right now. We handle petitions for various things like city commission packets and initiative petitions and the like. We keep the minutes, the contracts, the records, all official records, and we also handle risk management and insurance needs. So, elections and voting. Kind of the biggie for the clerk's office. We have several upcoming elections. November 5th is coming up quickly. Be here in a few weeks before we know it. That's our general election, local general election that we have every year. This year on the ballot we have two questions. One is the city commission race, and the other is the initiative petition for recreational marijuana. March 10th is our presidential primary next year. August 4th is our general primary. November 3rd is our general election. And we do have 7 city precincts, and those polls will be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. every election. I'm not going to go through all the statistics on this page. You can see them on your sheet there. Hopefully the audience can see that as well. This is just kind of some general information over the last 5 years. We have fluctuated a little bit on number of registered voters, but we hold pretty steady around that 12 to 13,000 mark. Our turnout stays kind of steady depending on what type of election. You will see a spike in 2018 as throughout the entire state. We saw that spike last year. You would compare that to 2014, where in the November election we would normally have in the 30% turnout. We had a 50% turnout, and the August election was quite a bit higher as well. And there's a number of different reasons that happened, but we expect that trend of higher turnouts to continue on as we move forward. And our percentage of absentee voters typically hovers around the 20 to 25%, and we expect that to actually go up with some of the changes that I'm going to talk about in a second. So, if you all remember, in 2018, November, we had Proposal 3, which passed on the ballot. That had several effects to the Michigan Constitution. So I'm just going to go through a few of those with you to let you know and the public know what those are. You now have where all registered voters are eligible to vote absentee. That's a huge change where in the past you had to have a specific reason to vote absentee, but now no reason is needed. Any person can come in and actually walk into the clerk's office, get an application to vote, and as of right now, get their actual ballot, vote it right there, or take it with them. You can also do that via mail, where you can do the entire process through mail. You could request an application be sent to you, that application can be mailed back, the ballot will be mailed to you, and then you can mail your ballot back, so it can all be done via U.S. Post Office as well. Permanent AV application list is now available to all. That's kind of a new thing as well that was just available to those who had specific reasons that qualified for them for that. Now any person can get on the permanent AV application list, which would allow you to automatically receive an application via the mail for every single election. So it's a simple little checkbox on the form if you're filling out your application to vote absentee this time, or you can call the clerk's office, email us, any way you want to contact us, basically, and we can get you on that permanent list as well. So, some further changes. Automatic voter registration is now done at the Secretary of State's office when applying for, updating, or renewing your driver's license or your state ID. And that's done unless a person declines. So that's kind of a flip from where we were in the past, where it was they asked the question and you could decline it, and it wasn't an automatic process, but now that happens regardless unless that citizen says, no, I do not want to be automatically registered. So that should continue to raise our registration further. And you can register to vote with proof of residency and obtain a ballot during the 2-week period prior to an election up to and including Election Day. Now that's a huge change that has never been done before in Michigan. So this is the first election where we'll be actually dealing with that new 2-week period and up to Election Day, where a voter who has never registered for or is changing residency can actually come in on Election Day and register to vote in the clerk's office, and would actually be able to vote right there in the clerk's office absentee, or they could actually go back to the poll, their precinct, and vote as well. So that's a big new change that's being implemented this election and will be huge next year in the presidential year. And then the straight ticket voting option has been restored. That was, if you remember, back and forth in the courts for a number of different back and forth cases, and that is now part of the Constitution, that straight ticket voting is on the ballot. This is just a website that I like to always point out. You can always tell people mi.gov/vote. It's a great little place. You can go and view your sample ballot. You can see the upcoming elections. You can verify your voter information. You can identify where you need to go, who your local clerk is. You can track the status of your absentee ballot, and that works throughout the state, in the city, wherever you're at. Your information will pull up, and you'll be able to see all that information. I'm not going to go into any details deep on the 2020 census because we just had a great presentation from Chloe, but this is some of the progress that we're doing actually internally. Some of our committees, we have created a complete count committee, and that has cross-departmental pieces of that, including the clerk's department, planning, public relations, finance, GIS, Neighborhood Resource Unit, Assessing, and Information Technology. So we meet on a monthly basis and continue to work, and that will continue to ramp up as we get closer to next year and through next year. We've partnered with the Isabella County Census Advisory Committee. I also sit on that committee with Chloe. We meet every other month right now, and that will be ramping up even more to every month and more, most likely, as we get closer. We are working with the Federal Census Hub in Chicago. I've had several communications with them. We're continuing to try to seek as much help as we can from the federal level, even though they have scaled back. And then also we are continuing to seek funding through grants and other funding sources. So I will just kind of leave you with this. This is a big piece. It's very important, like we talked about, that 25,000 mark. It's a tough mark, but we're going to do our best to count every person and try to hit that mark and shape your future. Start here. The United States Census 2020, April 1st, 2020. We just want to keep saying that over and over again, get it in people's heads to be counted on Census Day, April 1st. Any questions?
Just going back to your census slide, I don't remember if it was 1990 or if it was the 2000 census. It was one of those two. Cadillac missed the 25,000 by 4 people, which again is a huge. The 25,000 is so important because so much of your state shared revenue comes through on that formula basis, and there's a big jump between 24,999 and 25,000. There's huge jumps in that funding there.
Yeah. It would be nice if they lowered that amount with the losses that the entire state has had, if they lowered it to 20,000, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, it used to be there was also formulas in there for any city over 1 million, and we don't have a city over 1 million anymore either, so.
Yeah, those numbers have changed.
Jeremy, what are we going to do about follow-up? After, April 1st, is everyone supposed to go online April 1st and start filling out the census?
April 1st is the official census day, so there'll be events, there'll be a lot of stuff going on and revolving around that day. That's the official census day, be counted where you live on April 1st. But there is a lot of follow-up. Chloe talked about that from April to July time period, so that's the time period where you have an opportunity to try to go and find those people who have been missed. The federal government hopefully will be providing lists and looking for those people who have not responded. They'll be doing extra mailings during that time period to try to catch some of those people. There'll be multiple mailings to every residence you'll start seeing pretty soon.
Well, hopefully the server can handle that influx of April 1st applicants.
And we're still developing our strategies locally to see what we can do to help during that process as well, but we don't have all of that mapped out yet until we learn more about what the federal government's going to do.
Just for people sitting at home, the intent is to count everybody. They count the people in the jail, they count the people in nursing homes, they count the people in the hospitals. It's a big deal. We need every nose counted.
Every person counts.
Any other questions for Jeremy? Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any additions or deletions to the agenda tonight? Seeing none, we'll open our first public input time. If you'd like to make public comment on anything on our agenda this evening, please come to the podium, state your name, your address, and you have 5 minutes to address the commission. All right. Seeing no one come forward, I will now close the public comment section. And we will move into our receipt of petitions and communications. Manager Ridley.
Yes, under this section tonight, we have the report on pending items, and one item that is attached to that is the report on the benefits provided by having the Experimental Aircraft Association located on our airport land. You may recall that last year a motion was passed that authorized the city manager to sign renewals of our lease agreement with the EAA, but you asked that we bring you an annual report to the City Commission before I sign that renewal, outlining the activities that they are doing at our airport that have a positive impact. So if you have concerns about the amount of activity happening there, I'll need to know that fairly quickly as their lease is up for renewal in October. We also have on the receipts of petitions and communications, the August minutes of the Airport Advisory Board, the August minutes of the Planning Commission, and then the notice for you of 4 temporary traffic control orders that are in place for the next 90 days. 2 of them deal with no parking here to corner issues to deal with site issues, and one of them is at the intersection, near the intersection of Locust and Main, and the second one is Washington and Clayton. And then we have 2 new yield signs that were put in place. One is at Johnson McVeigh, and the other is at East Grand and Manor. So those will be in place for 90 days. And then the last communication we have for you is on the dais tonight. We received a communication from Mr. Andy Tyson, and he had asked that it be put in the packet, but we received it after the packet was already compiled, so I assured him we would give it to you this evening. And I also communicated to Mr. Tyson that at your last meeting, a zoning amendment was done that related to some of his parking lot reconstruction concerns. And I also indicated that on your agenda tonight is setting a public hearing to address some of the roof pitch concerns. So I let him know that via email, so he's aware of those activities that are going on.
Okay. Any items that need to be removed from the consent calendar this evening? Vice Mayor Gillis.
Number 13 and 14, please.
Any other items? Okay. Manager Ridley, would you like to go through the consent calendar?
Yes, the items we're recommending for this tonight include the approval of the minutes of your regular meeting of September 9th. We only have 1 bid for you this evening, and that bid is for the hauling of leaves and the hauling of snow out of the downtown and some of our parking lots. And as we continue to look for ways to make these contracts most cost-effective, when they were bid this year, we again combined both contracts together so that one contractor would handle both leaves and snow. And we also made it a 2-year contract so that they would know there would be a multi-year commitment there. So based on the 3 bids that we received, we're recommending the low bid of R&T Murphy Trucking at a cost of $114 per hour for the services that are scheduled with his firm. The contract for leaves would cover this year and next year, and the contract for snow removal would cover this snow season and the next snow season ending early in 2021. The next item on the consent calendar is based on a poll of the 7 of you, as well as the elected officials from Union Township Board. We've picked the date and time that worked for the most of you for a joint meeting with the township, and we're recommending you officially set that special meeting this evening, and it would be on Monday, September 30th at 6 o'clock instead of your normal 7 p.m., and the purpose of that meeting would be for a presentation from the engineering firm that provided the joint water study for both the township and the city. So the engineering consultants will be here to give that presentation and answer any questions the elected officials have on it.
Will that be taped?
Yes, it will be. And so it will be rebroadcast on MAC TV as well. The next item on the consent calendar is 4 items that are referred to you from the Planning Commission. And what we're asking you to do tonight on all 4 of these items is just set a public hearing for your next meeting, which is October 14th. And the first item is for the potential rezoning of 10 lots along Patrick Court. And the recommendation is to rezone those from, currently they are at CD3, and the recommendation is they would become CD4 with a residential dwelling only overlay. And this is consistent with the deed restrictions that exist for those lots. So if that rezoning is successful, it would eliminate the requirement of having to go through a special use process whenever a new duplex is constructed there. The second public hearing is a text change on recycling receptacles that would require developments to include both trash and recycling receptacles. And the third one would permit stacked parking in driveways allowing for that in just limited additional circumstances. And then the last recommended zoning amendment deals with the height of fences in side yards. It would increase it from the current 4 feet to 6 feet, which is consistent with an amendment that was done previously in 2015. It would also recommend that the roof pitch change be based on input that's been received. So it would allow for a residential roof pitch of 612 instead of the current minimum, which is 812. And then lastly, based again on input we received, it would change the driveway width at the frontage line so that the driveway width there could be 18 feet instead of the current 10 feet. And then the last item on the consent calendar would be approval of payrolls and warrants.
Commissioner Kulik.
Move to approve the consent calendar as presented, which shows that item 13 and 14 have been pulled off the consent calendar.
Vice Mayor Gillis.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed, the same? Passes unanimously. Next on our agenda is item number 12, which is consider a resolution designating a neighborhood enterprise zone for West Broadway Neighborhood Enterprise Zone number 1. Manager Riley, would you like to introduce us?
Yes, at your meeting on August 12th, you held a public hearing on this proposal to create a neighborhood enterprise zone district. But according to state law, action cannot be taken until 60 days after the public hearing was held. This is related to the 410 West Broadway project and would allow for consideration of tax abatement requests for the neighborhood portion of the project. As you'll recall, the purchase and development agreement that was agreed to between the city and Michigan Community Capital indicates that Michigan Community Capital needs and the city committed to approval of 2 tax abatement requests. Both of these requests are for the mixed, I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong one. So all you're doing with this resolution, if it's passed, is approving the district, and that would therefore allow applications to be submitted. So we recommend that the resolution be presented as approved, or be approved as presented. Had that backwards.
Commissioner Kulik.
Move the resolution as presented.
Commissioner Ling,
Second.
discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of the motion, please vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed, the same?
Aye.
So that motion passes 5-2. Next on our agenda is item number 13, which is considering a resolution to set a public hearing for our next meeting, October 14th, for an application for a neighborhood enterprise zone certificate. Manager Ridley?
Yes, since these are pulled off the consent calendar, you'll have to take 2 separate action items with it, but I'll cover them both in my comments. As I indicated, both of these requests are for the development at 410 West Broadway and would cover a 50% tax abatement for the development on that project. All you're doing this evening is setting a public hearing for October 14th to obtain public input on the tax abatement request. The one for the neighborhood enterprise zone would be for the residential portion of the development and would be a 50% abatement for 15 years. And the second one for the commercial redevelopment district would be for the first floor only part of the development and would be a 50% tax abatement for 12 years.
Commissioner Kulik.
Move the resolution to set the public hearing.
Commissioner Perschbacher?
Second.
Discussion? Commissioner Kulik.
All we're doing is setting the public hearing. The purpose of the public hearing is to gain public input. We're not doing any tax abatements or anything else by setting the public hearing. All we're doing is setting a public hearing tonight.
Seeing no other discussion, all those in favor of the motion, please vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed, the same.
Nay.
Aye.
So that passes 5-2. Item number 14 is also to consider resolution setting a public hearing for our next meeting. This is for an application for the commercial facility exemption certificate. Commissioner Kulik.
move the resolution to set the public hearing.
Commissioner Perschbacher.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please vote by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, the same.
Aye.
So that passes 5-2. Next on our agenda is number 19, which is to consider setting priorities for the fall 2019 Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe 2% funding request from city departments. Manager Ridley, would you like to introduce us?
I would just briefly say these requests are exactly as what you received 2 weeks ago. There were no changes to what was given to you in the September 9th packet, and we're asking you to do two things this evening. If there's any of the items that you have a concern with the priority that has been assigned to it as far as critical, high, or medium, we'd like to hear that from the commission this evening. And then secondly, if you could each indicate your top 5, we will accumulate those and communicate that to the tribal council as they're submitted before the end of the month.
Commissioner Kulik.
I'll start. The census, groundwater monitoring, used to be bayonet, but now it says substance, something or other there, peak, and the web redesign.
So you're referring to the Mid-Michigan Investigative Narcotic Team?
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm sorry, what did you say after peak?
Web redesign,
Okay, thank you.
What was the water one? Did you say one about water?
groundwater monitoring.
First one under Public Works.
Okay.
2020 census preparation, peak, Mid-Michigan Investigation Narcotics Team, septage receiving station, and lime residual removal.
Sure, Cap. Commissioner Wing.
The census, the peak, Mid-Michigan Investigative Narcotics Team, airport operational funding, and septic receiving station.
Commissioner Perschbacher.
Census, peak, the septic receiving station, Mid-Michigan Investigative Narcotics Team, and the airport operational.
Commissioner Toles, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Peak, 2020 census, Mid-Michigan Investigative Narcotic Team, Technical Rescue Team Equipment, Airport Operational Funding.
Yes, my number 1 is lime residual removal. It's a high priority for $200,000. Number 2 is septage receiving station. It's critical at $175,000. Number 3, clarifier rehabilitation. It is a high priority for $80,000. Number 4, 2020 United States Census preparation. It is a high priority for $60,000. And lastly, DPS EFIS repair. It is critical at $36,350.
I will start. The septage receiving station, the airport operational funding, the DPS EFIS repair, peak, and the 2020 United States Census preparation. Commissioner Kulik.
Just for the sake of argument, mine were not in any priority, they were just, those were my top 5.
Okay. Next on our agenda is number 20, which is consider a budget amendment for the contract with Center for Research and Rural Studies for information regarding the election process for mayors. Manager Ridley.
Yes, I'll make a couple comments, and then I would encourage members of the Charter Committee to chime in if they desire to. But as you're aware, the Charter Committee has been working on research related to how mayors are elected in cities similar to Mount Pleasant. And the research is being done so that the City Commission can consider whether they want to recommend a ballot proposal on an upcoming election in 2020. Based on the research that was primarily conducted by Addie in my office, the Charter Committee identified 18 cities that have population between 20,000 and 40,000 or have a university in them. And 14 of those 18 have the mayor elected at large, and the four of them plus us have the mayor elected by the City Commission. The Charter Committee discussed that it would likely be a good idea to complete the research to contact individuals in those 18 communities and ask questions such as how long has the election been held that way? Has it recently been changed? Has there been discussion about changing the election process? And whether they see if there's pros or cons to the way the election process is handled for the mayor. And in all cases, it doesn't have anything to do with changing the authority of the mayor. It's about just how the mayor is elected. And as the committee talked about those types of questions that might be helpful to have the perspective on, there was a discussion about a desire to make sure the input that we receive is quite objective from those communities. So they asked that we contact the Center for Applied Research and Rural Studies at CMU to see if this is the type of research that CARS might be willing to do, and if so, what the timing would be for doing that research on our behalf and what the cost would be. So I've met with representatives from CARS, and they've indicated it definitely is the type of research that they provide, and they provided a proposal for doing the survey. And they can complete the work by the end of this year and have a presentation ready by January. And so the Charter Committee is recommending a budget amendment of $4,000 so that we can contract with CARS to do that final piece of research before the City Commission decides whether they want to consider a ballot proposal that would change that election process.
Commissioner Kulik.
Move to approve the budget amendment of $4,000 for the CARS research study as presented.
Commissioner Ling.
Second.
Commissioner Kulik.
As a member of the Charter Committee, I've been opposed to the idea of a at-large elected mayor, and I felt it was important that, and one of the things we looked at doing was having members of the Charter Committee call selected cities and do that. And the problem I had with that is I'm going to just hear the negatives. People that are in favor are only going to hear the positives. By having CARS, a neutral third party, come in and do that, I think we'll get a better survey. It'll be more statistically correct and a better report for the commission to use next year.
I would echo those sentiments. I'm also on the Charter Committee, and I'll be voting in support of the budget amendment tonight. Vice Mayor Gillis.
I have been in support for elected mayor by the people for years, long before I became part of the City Commission, long before I became part of the Planning Commission back in 2005. Since my tenure here on the City Commission, we have spoke about this topic several times. Most of the time, the Charter decided not to move, the Charter Committee decided not to move on the subject for whatever reason. It was too late in the season, it was a presidential election. I've seen many commissioners say in public that they are favored of an elected mayor, yet have not done anything to encourage this process or to get it to the vote of the people. Whatever comes from this study, we still, because it's part of our charter, we still have to put it on the ballot and allow the people of Mount Pleasant to vote on this issue. So I have been trying myself in the past 4 years to get movement on this, so I am very happy to see that we're going in some direction to try to get avenues of different possibilities of a mayor-elect. I do not know if the same excuse after we get this information and we spend $4,000 to get this information, if I won't hear the same excuse next year at the beginning of the year that, well, it's going to be a presidential election and we don't want too many things on the ballot. So I would encourage any of our community members that have spoken to me and have spoken about this subject and feel adamant that they would like a mayor to be elected by the people, to make sure you reach out to one of your representatives here on the dais, or send us a letter, an email, or show up and give us your views, because we had a League of Women Voters candidate debate last week. Out of the 4 candidates, 4 of them were in favor of an elected mayor. So I found that very promising, and I know there's been several community members that have reached out to me and said the same sentiments, that they would like a mayor elected by the people. So I will be supporting this evening, and I hope it is fruitful money and we really do what we intend to do and not just waste $4,000 and decide next year not to put it on the ballot. So, thank you.
Commissioner Kulik.
It takes 5 affirmative votes of this commission to put a item to amend the charter on the ballot, and irregardless of what CARS comes back, whether they come back in favor or against it, $4,000 spent for that sort of a study is never a wasted money.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please vote by saying aye. 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 And those opposed, the same. So that passes unanimously. Next on our agenda is to consider a closed session pursuant to subsection 8D of the Open Meetings Act to consider the purchase or lease of real property. Commissioner Kulik?
So moved.
Commissioner Perschbacher?
Second.
So that calls for a roll call vote. Jeremy, would you like to start?
Yes. Commissioner Kulik,
Yes.
Commissioner Lalone,
Yes.
Commissioner Ling,
Yes.
Commissioner Perschbacher,
Yes.
Commissioner Toles,
No.
Vice Mayor Gillis,
Yes.
Mayor Joseph.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Next on our agenda is announcements on city-related issues and new business. Vice Mayor Gillis.
We have an opening on our Parks and Rec Commission, and applications can be found at mountpleasant.org under Boards and Commissions. And if you're interested in that committee, please take the time to put an application in. And if you're interested in other committees, we have turnover all the time on our boards, so please look at the applications and see if something might suit your fancy, because we would love you to have you join our team. I also want to say we're a couple months out from the November election. We do have 2 city commission seats that our incumbents are not staying with us, so we will be electing 2 new city commissioners. And just as I mentioned, the League of Women Voters had a new city commission candidate forum. You can find that on MAC TV if you weren't able to attend last Thursday. And you can also go to their website, the League of Women Voters website. They have some questions that all 5 candidates responded to. And for any other information, you can go to vote411.org for any ballot or any ballot election that is going to be happening this fall, City Commission and the other ones that are going to be running. So if you need some information on that before you pick up your absentee ballot or before November's election, that's where you can find it. Thank you.
Commissioner Kulik.
Since we have 4 new people running for the 2 seats out there, 5, I'm sorry. Nancy, would it be appropriate to have either Jeremy or Brian send those people a copy of the zoning ordinance, where you can put your campaign signs, like they don't go between the sidewalk and the curb, they have to be on people's property?
I think we,
Part of it.
Yeah, we don't typically send them automatically, but normally, once they start having those questions, I get that, and I've got a big giant paragraph of stuff that I usually send to people. A lot of that's partly campaign finance, so I always refer them also to the county clerk. But yeah, we have communications pretty regularly with the people who want to put up signs.
Okay, and the other thing is, Nancy, your email that we got from you said we're getting close to the time to start dealing with leaves. And if you'd give the public those dates, I would appreciate it. And I guess as a favor to John over there, I don't think you want the leaves raked into the curb, into the gutter pan until closer to they're going to actually be picked up, because they will plug up the sewers and make a heck of a mess.
But with the collection, yes.
yes, we encourage people to wait until the week before pickup before they start raking them into the street. But our first week of pickup is the week of October 28th. So the week before that is when we would encourage people to rake. And then we do every other week until the end of November. So those dates are on our website, and they'll also be in our newsletter. But the first week of pickup is October 28th.
I have one announcement. This Saturday, September 28th, Isabella County Restoration House, which acts as the rotating homeless shelter for Isabella County, is having a lead volunteer information night. It will be, or it's actually in the morning. It's Saturday at 10 a.m. at their new office on Pine Street, which is right next to the Michigan Building and ACAP. So if you're interested in volunteering for them, you can show up at 10 a.m. and learn a lot of good stuff. Any other announcements or new business? Seeing none, I will now open the next public comment section. This is a chance to talk about anything that's city-related. You can come to the podium, state your name and your address, and you'll have 5 minutes.
Hi, I'm Meredith Wiles. I live at 3700 East Deerfield. I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm the CMU Student Government City Commission Liaison, so I'll be hanging out at these meetings for any concerns or things you're happy about the university doing or students. I assume more concerns, but I'll take anything. Yeah, so I'll be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Tony.
Miss?
Meredith?
We're going to really need your help for this 2020 census. I don't know if you've been here for the whole meeting.
Yes, I've been getting excited about it.
Especially the off-campus housing. It's critical that we in Union Township get an accurate count.
Yeah, I'll make sure to make that a priority for student government. Anything else?
Thank you. Seeing no one else coming forward, I will now close the public comment section. And we are going to recess for a work session for a presentation on our 2020 operating budget.
Wait. What happened to number 23?
That's what I'm,
That's the.
Oh, okay.
yep. And we'll be,
Yeah, we're going to do the presentation down here because it's easier to see the PowerPoint slides at home if we have the direct feed to the camera. So we'll do that down here, then take another quick recess to head upstairs for the rest of your work session about current year goals. 5 minutes?
5 minutes?
Sure. 3, 2? bunch of little comments, not a whole lot of questions. Like, there's one thing that,
Okay. So we're back for our presentation by Finance Director Mary Ann Cornexel on the 2020 budget process.
Okay.
Before Mary Ann starts, I would mention we have a number of work sessions scheduled over the next meetings. So tonight's intent that Mary Ann is going to do is give you an overview of some of the primary things that are in the budget. So it might pique your interest of various sections to read when you get to that part of it.
Okay. And you all got copies of the budget, the bound copies of it, and for any of the viewers at home that are watching this, you can get a copy of this by looking at the library. It's also on our website, or you can come in here to City Hall to look at that if you want more information on the budget. So, the foundation of the budget and the daily operations for the city are the 9 vision statements. A listing of the tactics being undertaken for each of the vision statements is on pages 4 to 9 of the intro section of the budget document. Earlier this year, the City Commission set the following 6 priority areas for 2020. To ensure a complete census count, to finish the master plan in an inclusive and effective manner and secure adoption, to strengthen and diversify the local economy, to ensure sustainable city finances, to maintain the city infrastructure, to attract, retain, and develop effective and efficient staff. These will be the topic of the first budget work session to set priorities and strategic action strategies for these. Overall, the city budget for all funds is $34.1 million. Majority of this is the general fund at $13.7 million. The special revenue funds are $5.6 million, which is mainly the major and local street funds and the recreation fund. The enterprise funds, which operate like businesses, are $8.5 million, which are mainly in water, sewer, and solid waste. The 2020 general fund revenue is estimated at $13.9 million, with majority 46% coming from property taxes and 24% from intergovernmental state shared revenue. Some highlights of the general fund revenue are the 2020 millage rate is proposed to remain at 16.25 mils. We're projecting a 1.5% estimate in increase in taxable value. For the first time in decades, we're expecting full funding from the state for fire protection of state-owned facilities in the city, which is mainly CMU, and this is for 2019 and 2020. This increase is projected to be $300,000 annually. State shared revenue projections come from the state and currently are projected to increase $43,000 over the year. This chart illustrates the city millage has remained the same in total since 2015, which actually is since 2014. The amount going to the general operations has increased from 11.57 to 12.41 over the last 6 years. The general fund expenditures are projected to be $13.7 million. Since we are a service organization, it's 71% of our budget is on expenditures for compensation. Here's a breakdown of the general fund expenses by division, with public safety being 54%, public works being 7%, legislative 8%, finance 11%, and community services at 20%. The general fund expenditures are remaining mainly the same in 2019, same as 2019. A few changes are, we're including funding for the census promotion. We're anticipating 3 elections. The fire department will be purchasing new self-contained breathing apparatuses using 2% tribal funding, and the detectives will get a replacement vehicle. Some more changes are we will be installing pedestrian lighting on Michigan Street. This will be done in conjunction with the street reconstruction and the streetscape improvements in that area. Like the projects near campus for pedestrian lighting, this will be special assessed to the commercial property, with them paying 70% and 30% paid for by this capital improvement millage. We've included the funding for the 9-month park position that was approved earlier this year. At the conclusion of the 9-month period, we will be evaluating the position and we will discuss it at a future work session. There will be new sidewalks installed along Henry. And lastly, we've expanded the residential sidewalk snow removal expenditures to allow for the removal of snow on 25 miles of sidewalk. For the general fund balance, overall, it is anticipated there will be $11,740 added to the unassigned general fund balance at the end of the year, bringing it to $3.2 million, which is 22.1% of the 2020 budget. There will be $849,000 in the assigned for economic initiatives fund balance at the year end. This includes a $250,000 contribution from the TIFA and the EDC for the balloon payment that is due on January 1st for the properties on North Main that were sold on a land contract. As was done in the 2019 amended budget presented last meeting, we are assigning $100,000 for an additional contribution to the MERS Defined Benefit Pension Program. We will give you more details about our recommendation in future budget work session. We are keeping with the original payback plan for the internal borrowing that was done in 2016 to pay for the demolition of buildings on the Mount Pleasant Center property. There will be $236,000 added to the fund balance assigned for vacation payable and economic initiatives. Some highlights of the other funds. In the local street fund, we'll be reconstructing Michigan Street from Oak to Washington. In the major street fund, we'll be reconstructing Brown Street from North Drive to Broadway, and we'll be doing an overlay of Pickard Street from Bradley to Mission, both of which are partially grant funded. There are 3 years left of payments for the bond sold to finance the West Broadway revitalization project. We have been projecting a shortfall in the making the required debt payment beginning in 2020. This shortfall assumes, or this budget assumes the proceeds of the sale of 410 West Broadway will fill the shortfall for 2020. The special assessment budget has been funding for the pedestrian lighting that's proposed on Michigan Street. Some highlights of the enterprise funds, which are the businesses. In the airport, we'll be completing phase 2 of the tree abatement that is funded by grants, and we'll be adding a deer call. In the sewer fund, we're pleased to announce that the bonds are paid off in 2019 and there's no sewer bonds left. In the solid waste fund, we will continue the twice-a-year no-fee brush pickup using 2% funding left over from 2019. We have increased our efficiency in pickup and also found that the piles are smaller as this program has evolved. Both the water and sewer plants are beginning to show their age and require large capital projects. Some highlights of the component units are on Mission Street. We'll be reconstructing the alley from Bellows to Gaylord and installing enhanced intersection lighting on High and Pickard, which will be similar to the lighting that was added on Broomfield. For the TIFA, we'll continue at a 0% capture for Industrial Park North and downtown TIFAs. The downtown fund balance will be used to reconstruct parking lot number 7 and design of lots 6 and 8. The following are the projects to be funded by the capital improvement millage. We have $150,000 for the downtown improvement program, which will be used for planter replacement, $128,000 for Mission Creek Dam removal, $115,000 for the downtown streetscape on Michigan Street, $100,000 for trails and bridge decks, $85,000 for Sunnyside Park playground equipment, $50,000 for DPS kitchen remodel, $40,000 for DPS EFS repairs, $36,000 for the city share of pedestrian lighting on Michigan Street, $26,000 for the City Hall portion of the access control system, $25,000 for Riverside Cemetery Mausoleum roof, $20,000 for Island Park ball field improvements, $15,000 for 2021 downtown alley reconstruction design, and lastly, $5,000 for Parks Partnership. In 2018, the City Commission adopted a policy for fees and charges. The 2019 budget began the process of adjusting these fees that were most outdated and affected the most customers. The 2020 budget continues this by looking at cemetery lot sales and internment fees, DPW work for other fees, recycling pickup fee for residents that aren't required to have curbside pickup, recycle bin replacement, sewer lab fees, water and sewer demand charges, water service installation deposits, Christmas tree disposal, DPW after-hours inspections, RV dump station, unauthorized use of fire hydrant. We will provide more details on these at the work session this fall. Each year, we do an analysis of our rates for the business activities of water, sewer, and solid waste. We are recommending that the bag tag and curbside recycling fees remain the same. It is recommended that the water and sewer monthly readiness to serve rates be increased. This table illustrates the cost for a typical residential unit with a 5/8" meter using 5,000 gallons of water. The total increase is $2 per month or $24 annually. The fee for larger meters also goes up in the same proportion. Some items that are still unresolved or unknown at this time are, we are always at the state's mercy for their state shared revenue and as far as how they budget. This year, we are even more at the state's mercy as we have continued to anticipate a $300,000 increase in state fire protection. It is also unknown how the sales tax on marijuana will affect state shared revenue. Also, a few municipalities recently won a lawsuit in regards to the state's calculation of state shared revenue, the effect of which has not been projected yet. The proposed budget doesn't have anything for the master plan, should anything arise in the adoption of that. The proposed budget has the same revenue expenditures for parking enforcement as before the 3-hour downtown parking enforcement was suspended due to the court ruling that prevents us from chalking tires. Currently, there's a survey of the downtown business owners and property owners is being conducted. Once we have a decision on how and if we handle 3-hour enforcement, we'll be amending this budget. I gotta back up, sorry. This budget anticipates $15,000 in annual fees for the 3 currently licensed medical marijuana facilities. It does not project anything for adult use annual fees or the sharing of excise taxes from the sale of adult use marijuana. We are currently working on the details of an agreement with Nottawa Township for treatment of their sewer. This will be before the City Commission this fall. Once this is approved and the anticipated timeline for connection is known, we will be able to estimate the revenue for this to the sewer fund. Lastly, you know that you set a special meeting with the township to review the joint water study. Once the decisions are made on the implementation, the budget impact, if any, will be calculated. So next steps on the budget are several work sessions, as Nancy indicated. On October 14th, we'll be presenting information on the effectiveness of the 9-month parks position added earlier and discussing priorities and strategies for the 2020 goals. And on October 28th, we'll present details on the fee recommendations. We will also be looking at the LDFA. As earlier this year, you approved the conceptual plan for the SMART zone covered by the LDFA agreement. At that time, we indicated we weren't talking funding. We were only talking about the conceptual plan. So we'll talk about that in the work session. Lastly, we will review the change in funding for downtown capital projects that was approved last year with the reduction of the TIFA capture to 0. We'll present these projects in more detail. On November 11th, we'll address your questions. And then November 25th, we'll have a work session if we need any more. So if you could get your questions to the city manager by October 25th, that will allow us enough time to prepare the answers for the November 11th work session. On November 11th, we'll hold a public hearing where the public can come and give comments on the budget. And then, of course, we have to have the budget adopted by the last meeting. So budget, all fall.
Tony?
I'd just like to comment, this will be my last budget as a commissioner, and each year that document gets better and better, easier to read, clear, transparent, nothing's hidden. Some of these things that Mary Ann went over as far as, you know, we're doing this, we're doing that. Well, if you go through the actual budget document, much of the justification and reasoning is in there, not just cliff notes. Other communities will do a budget and it's just a page of numbers and there's nothing to go along with them. I really want to compliment Mary Ann and her staff and all the city departments for coming up with a readable, usable document.
Any questions, comments for Nancy or Mary Ann?
I would certainly agree with Commissioner Kulik. I think it's one of the reasons we get that certificate each year is because we're so transparent, and I think that the budget document is one of the things that is the most transparent, so that any citizen, we do have a public hearing on the budget, and for any citizen who really wants to know how the money's being spent and have input on it, that public hearing, which is, was that on here? Yeah, November 11th, is the perfect opportunity to be able to comment on it. I do have to just mention briefly, it was so great to hear the general fund will actually have a balanced budget where we are putting money into the unassigned fund. I think it's been a long time, and it does reflect, I think, very careful budgeting on the part of the finance department.
Seeing no one else, thank you, Mary Ann. We will now recess for 5 minutes, and we'll go into our work session upstairs in Conference Room A to talk about 2019 goals